Hello, everyone. So, my name is Emal. I'm a translator, language localization consultant for German and English, and I want to talk about a problem today that I call spray and pray, and it's persistent across machine translation, but also in AI. So, like this picture shows, AI generated, of course. You feed in apples and you get out all sorts of other fruits. So you put something in, you don't know what you're getting back out. This is a persistent problem. So in my case, I'm talking about terminology. Why can't machine translation just use the same words? And I want to go a bit into this also from the customer perspective. So when you work on customer projects, a lot of times customers don't care so much about terminology because it's work for them. Some customers, other customers do, but a lot of customers that are not very mature, they do not care about collecting terminology or having their right terminology, but they do care about consistency because if we look at the below examples, we have this term activity metric, activity metric, activity metric. It's like some sort of KPIs, I think. And it's translated different in German. So this is a very recurring issue, right? So when you're doing machine translation post-editing, you see one time it's called Tätigkeitsmetrik, then it's called Aktivitätsmetrik. Then, on the other hand, when it's capitalized, it might be called something entirely different or not translated as at all. Sometimes it then does get translated. So this is very inconsistent output, although the input is consistent. So I'm not talking about whether Aktivitätsmetrik or Tätigkeitsmetrik is the actual right term in this context. There are multiple options, but it's very obvious to a customer who does not even speak German. It's very obvious to see that there are different target terms, and this is a legitimate complaint. Um, Another example is below. Here we have competitive behavior in two different segments, and then one time they translate it as Wettbewerbsverhalten, and the other time they call it Verhalten im Wettbewerb. These are not terms that you will usually put in your glossary. They are not, these are generic terms, they're not company specific. And quite frankly, most people don't care what you're going to call it, but you should call it the same thing. When you are doing machine translation post editing, you are going to spend amazing amounts of time basically just searching and replacing terms. This is also due to the limitations in CAT tools. For example, a lot of cloud-based CAT tools do not support advanced regex, regular expression search, so which would make it a lot easier to search and replace terms or filter out segments. In other words, it's a very manual process. You really spend a lot of time manually cleaning up these terms when you're not really changing any sentences or you're not fixing any errors. You're just basically fixing inconsistent machine translation output. So maybe um, that's what I want to talk about. So they are very easy for clients to spot these errors, right? They might not always complain, but and it also has a high user impact. You have a button that's translated different ways. Let's say you have a button that's called apply, and you have 5 different target translations because apply by itself can mean so many things. That's a real problem. So as mentioned, many clients won't, if you're describing their software, they don't care if you call a tab a Reiter or if you call it a tab. At least if they don't have a style guide, they don't care. Um, but they do care about inconsistent output. So this is something that translators really, when they are doing MTPE, that's something that they need to fix. They spend a lot of time on this. I couldn't find a study on the exact time that fixing term or errors in MTPE actually occupies, but from my experience, I know that I spend a whole lot of time just doing search and replace. This is something that could totally be automated or fixed with AI, but first, the CAT tools really need to make these features available. Um, so as mentioned, the effort is regardless of whether there's a glossary or not. because I will also get into the technical details of that. We saw that DeepL has a glossary function now, right? Everybody knows about it, and you're like, oh, wow, awesome. I can just standardize all my terms. Well, creating such a glossary is a huge amount of work, and then you're still going to need to clean up the output because the terms can just have different meanings. It's no one size fits all solutions. Glossaries are not the solution to this problem. I'm talking about scenarios where you don't have a glossary at all connected. You're not injecting anything into the machine translation output, and you don't have any right terms. What I want, as I call it, using the wrong term but using it consistently is better than using the right term but inconsistently. Because if you have consistent output, that's a lot easier to clean up than inconsistent output, right? Um, and it's a lot of, it can also be like expressions, things you phrase certain ways, like syntactic constructions, right? These are very hard to actually train into a machine translation engine, you know? You can also, you could always sometimes you have your quirks as a writer, you know what how you like to express things, and it just doesn't comply, and it's really hard to train this behavior into a machine translation engine. um, so one maybe the main technical reason for this is that machine translation has a very narrow context window, as we call it, inside the cat tool, but also in MT. So first, what do I mean by that? It translates sentence by sentence. It does not know necessarily that sentences form paragraphs and paragraphs form larger texts. There is some technology that can kind of tell the MT that, like the sequence and the previous and the following sentence, but all in all, machine translation by itself as a technology has a very, very narrow context window. If you use AI for translation, you're going to notice that the first thing you're going to notice is that LLMs will use terms more consistently simply because they have a larger context window. But this can also become challenging when you're just translating huge and huge amounts of text. Um, so I asked ChatGPT about this issue with the context window, and the answer seems plausible to me. Uh, do machine translation engines always process sentences one by one, even without an API? If I enter multi-sentence text into the UI, so I'm talking about the Google Translate or DeepL UI, machine translation engines typically process input sentence by sentence, even if you enter multiple sentences at once. Um, so this is basically the crux of the matter. Then let's say, okay, we're using an LLM for translation instead of machine translation because they have larger context windows. Well, you still need to hook up your LLM to a CAT tool, and that's CAT tools are built for segment by segment translation. So let me quote ChatGPT once again. Do CAT tools break down text into individual segments, even when using an LLM for translation? Um, so basically, every sentence is a separate API call. So it's a separate, you know, you send a separate message for each sentence to the LLM. Yes, most CAT computer-assisted translation tools do break down text into individual segments, even when using an LLM for translation. A segment in a CAT tool is typically a sentence, but it can also include smaller units, blah, 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 as we all know, depending on the segmentation rules. So usually the line breaks and so on are the line breaks or full stops are usually the segment limits. So we are dealing with very narrow context windows, and this is unlikely to change with AI soon, as long as we have CAT tools. And then let me get back to the well, but my MT engine supports glossaries comment objection. Glossaries are a theoretical functionality. So yes, you can upload a glossary and send it to a CAT tool. And by a machine translation glossary, let me make that clear, is not the same thing as a term base. A term base contains like all your corporate terminology, everything that you want to specify. A machine translation glossary is much narrower. It's basically for a given text, the list of terms that you want to be translated consistently. some CAD tools offer a feature, and a lot of MT engines offer have this API functionality that their API can also accept glossaries. It's called terminology injection, among other things. So they can inject your preferred terms from your glossary into the output segment by segment. But this is a theoretical functionality, so this is a real support ticket I opened for a CAD tool that I use, and they are working with a leading machine translation provider. I asked them, hey, I got the glossary. Why isn't the output consistent, right? Well, they answer, please note that blah, blah, blah is the only engine which reserves the right not to follow the glossary, so to speak, as their engine takes those terms more as suggestions than strict orders and can ultimately go for different solutions. This is affected by the third-party system, so there's not much we can do about it. So basically, yes, you make the effort to create a glossary, upload it into the CAD tool, and then the MT engine basically just ignores it. It's not something that works very well, so still lots of manual cleanup, machine translation, post-editing required, not very intelligent work, actually. Um, As mentioned, LLMs have a larger context window. So here I'm comparing just random output. A I translated a translation of the German civil code, the BGB. And here we see the main difference, right? We have the term residence. It's translated from German. I think it's called Wohnsitz in the original, actually. And I'm comparing GPT 3.5 Turbo and DeepL. Um, if you look at it more closely, you're going to see that basically the like the syntactic quality or in the semantics is pretty much, there's no huge difference between DeepL and GPT 3.5. Although, but the main difference is that this term residence, doesn't have much context. It's translated sentence by sentence in DeepL. That's why it's going to say Wohnsitz, Wohnsitz, where it has the context, but then it's going to call it Aufenthalt, Aufenthalt in another context. So this is just one example from the wide field of legal translation. You can imagine the BGB has, I think, thousands of sections with uh, equally large number of specialized terms. So you can see where this is going. This is going to be a huge cleanup effort. With GPT 3.5 Turbo, we have a large context window. It kind of understands that all of this forms one paragraph, and it's going to understand automatically without specifying this in the prompt. You could do that, of course. It's going to understand that this term should always be the same. Um, but as I mentioned, it gets very tricky when you're translating huge amounts of text because eventually it's going to exceed the context window. You're limited to a certain amount of tokens, and I yet don't have the perfect answer how to do this with a LLM. Either you write a very narrow, detailed system prompt with terminology, or you actually pre-train a model with your own terminology. But I haven't tried this out yet. But I think these are the ways it's going to go. Um, so that that lets me kind of outline the problem. So terminology cleanup currently with machine translated output, if you're post editing, is a huge effort. It's, I think, the majority of the effort. I'm not rewriting sentences so much. I'm just fixing inconsistent terms. I'm not researching the right ones, mind you. I'm not I'm not looking for what's the right term. I'm not going through translation memories and kind of best guessing what I find there, or going through glossaries, or it's other references that the customer provides, like unstructured data, so to say. I'm just trying to pick a term, stick with it, and make it the same in the whole target text, and that is a lot of work still currently. And to fix this issue, CAT tools and machine translation or AI, if it replaces machine translation, I think for this particular task, it has more potential. Um, we need larger context windows. It can't go on like this, that you have a separate call for for every sentence. This is like a huge limitation. Um, I also think that prompt-based customization is something that MT engines must have. So right now, they offer some basic features like you can change from formal to informal address, I think, in DeepL, and some other things. But you could you need more advanced customization with AI. You have like, write this in a friendly tone, address the reader directly, change, do not translate passive voice as passive voice, and so on and so on. So this is all stuff that you really need to produce good machine translation output. Yeah, or always use the Latin term. For example, if you have activity, you always want to say Aktivität, not Tätigkeit. If you have rules like that, it helps you make the output more consistent. Or use simple verbs and so on. Um, we need customization, and as general rules, we don't. What does not help is if you put all these simple verbs that you want to have in a glossary. That's not going to work. Say, you always say durchführen, run, ausführen, do, uh, reparieren, fix. That's not going to work if you put a glossary in there. You actually need to give it general instructions like you would a human, and then it's going to use that style. Um, and basically, it's got to be easy and it's got to work. And yeah, this is something we're still waiting for. So that's something we, yeah, basically, up let me wrap up my talk. Um, Terminology, cleaning up terminology is just a huge amount of work in machine translation post editing. The technology is very limiting. Their AI has more potential, but we have already had, let's say, promising technologies like glossaries that were not well implemented, say that, so they don't really help that much. So it's really about re, better implementation of what's already there, improving consistency, um, and that's basically it. So I thank you very much for your attention, for joining this talk. If you want to get in touch, here's my LinkedIn contact, linkedin.com, Germling. I have my own handle, or my website. Yeah, and I'm happy about your feedback or if you have similar experiences. Thank you very much and have a great day.